we'll post the recording of this on our website, and I believe we will mail the link to the recording out to you so that you can view it again at your leisure. So my name is Toni Marsh, and I'm the director of the George Washington University Paralegal Studies program. I want to welcome you, and I want to thank you for joining us. And I see that we've also got Christopher Beatty on the line. Christopher is the recruiter who you've all spoken to at one time or another. Wonderful person, and I'm really glad to have Chris online. So if any of you have any questions for Chris, feel free to pop it. You got him right now. So don't let him just sit back and relax. We need to, he needs to be working. So, but anyway, thank you to all of you who joined us. So as I said, I am the director of the GW Paralegal. Let me put my phone on mute. Sorry, that's rude. Okay. I'm the director of the GW Paralegal Studies program. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for 29 years now. I've been practicing law. I do criminal defense. I do juvenile law. I no longer practice a whole lot. I mostly just do paralegal education now. But over the course of my career, I've spent a lot of time working with paralegals, teaching paralegals, studying paralegals. I started right out of law school. So right when I graduated from law school in 1990, I answered a classified ad in my local newspaper that was they were looking for, our local community college was looking for an adjunct professor, somebody to teach litigation. I thought that sounded fun. I was a litigator. And so I did it, and I never went back. I've been teaching ever since. And as the years rolled by, I taught more and more and practiced less and less. And eventually I became a full-time educator. But I love the paralegal profession, and I'm very devoted to it. I think paralegals are great, and I really think that paralegals are a key, crucial element in providing access to justice to the really largely underserved population, even here in the United States. So over the course of my career and studying paralegals and studying non-lawyers and access to justice, I've learned that there are vast swaths of, well, first of all over the world, there are vast swaths of people who will never have access to a lawyer. And I know a lot of people, the first thing that they say is they laugh and say, well, that's wonderful. But really it's not, right? Not having access to justice, not having access to the legal system. I mean, if none of us had lawyers, that would be fine. But when some do and some don't, that's when the people who don't have access to lawyers or to good, competent legal assistance are really at a disadvantage. And it's a problem. So I started out by studying communities around the world. I ended up in Tanzania sort of by chance and through a connection that I made here in Washington, D.C. with a woman who was the director of the Legal and Human Rights Center in Tanzania. We struck up she was here in Washington, D.C. as a guest of then Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, and we struck up a professional friendship, which turned into a personal friendship, and I ended up going to Tanzania a lot to study paralegal models there. So the paralegal models in Tanzania are quite sophisticated and effective, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. The picture you see on the screen in front of you right now is the girl in the very middle with the glasses is one of my students, and one of my other students is, I think, not in the picture. She didn't end up in this picture, but you see Yadira Sanchez in the very middle there in a community that we went out and worked with in Tanzania. So we went over there, as I said, several times to study the model of non-lawyers or paralegals providing access to justice in Tanzania. So that was how it started. And then I became really interested in the idea of non-lawyers providing access to justice in the U.S. And so I decided to look at a small community. So I started by looking at, I thought I would look at Indian communities, which are tribal, like most of Tanzania, or all of Tanzania is. And was easy for me to study. So that was how I got onto this whole topic of looking at non-lawyers or paralegals in providing access to justice in tribal communities. My work in Tanzania and Nevada then led me to work with Indian tribes in Ecuador. So the Quechua Indian tribe in Ecuador, which I studied last year and will be going back to again this July to sort of tie all of that together even more. So let's go ahead and get started. That's by way of introduction. So this is me and in Tanzania, and that the people all assembled behind me are the very first cohort of paralegal studies that I taught at the University of Bagamoyo in Tanzania. So what we did, as I said, in Tanzania, there's a large paralegal population. They provide most of the access to justice, but there was no formal paralegal education program in Tanzania. So until I went there. So I went over there in 2000, I think it was 14 or 15. I joined the faculty of the University of Bagamoyo, and along with a cohort of about 35 or 40 students, I designed for them and with them a paralegal studies program. So the people that you see in the picture are college students, law students, and young lawyers. And they all came together at the University of Bagamoyo to learn how to design a paralegal program, because they needed to learn this so that they could go off and design these programs in their own villages and towns and regions, and thus make the program sustainable and grow the program. So with this group of young professionals, we worked together to design the program. So we ended up having a program, and they learned how to design one all at the same time. And then I ended up joining the faculty of the University of Bagamoyo. By the way, I just have to share this while I am, while we're on the subject of Bagamoyo. Bagamoyo is a very, very beautiful town on the Indian Ocean, on the east coast of Tanzania. So it's in East Africa. And it was a slave trading port. It was a slave market. And on the beautiful sugar white sands of Bagamoyo that look out over these crystal blue seas of the Indian Ocean, there are these very ugly stone blocks with iron rods coming through them. And that was where the slaves would be chained up. And they would look out over the ocean, and they would see the slave ships that were there ready to take them, ready to take the human beings that they bought over to the Middle East and parts of North Africa, where these people would be slaves and where their lives would effectively be over. And so the saying was that they would, the word Bagamoyo means lay down your heart. And so they would lay down their hearts, they would lay down their hopes on the sands of Bagamoyo before they headed out on those slave ships. And so the University of Bagamoyo, the Legal and Human Rights Center in Tanzania decided to create a university, and they decided purposely to create it in Bagamoyo. And what they said was they would pick up all of that hope, and they would pick up those hearts that had been left on the sand, and they would use that to build a university. And the tagline of the university is, in Bagamoyo we were enslaved, and in Bagamoyo we shall be free. So it's a beautiful story, and it's a beautiful place. And these are my students. They have all gone on to do wonderful things. The woman that you see in the front row with the black and white T-shirt on, the rebel who wouldn't wear the GW T-shirt that I brought for the class, ended up becoming the director of the Paralegal Studies program at the University of Bagamoyo. She's a world leader now in gender studies. You see a guy in the very back. He's got a white smile. He's wearing a dark blue T-shirt. He's sort of to the right. One of the tallest guys, that's George. He's gone on to become the director of TANLAP, which is the National Legal Association in Tanzania. And many other have gone on to found their own paralegal clinics. So it turned out to be a really good model. And the relationship there has kept up. And I've continued to study paralegals and paralegal models over there. So I want to talk a little bit about how I got involved in, not how I got involved in tribes, but more about the tribes themselves and what it is that ties together the tribes of Tanzania, the Gogo, the Maasai, the Tarime, and others in Tanzania with the American Indian tribes in Nevada, or the North American Indian tribes in Nevada. And we specifically studied the Paiute, the Moapa, the Walker River tribe, the Reno Sparks tribe, the Las Vegas Paiute, and the Moapa Paiute. But what ties together the varied tribes of Tanzania, the varied tribes of North America, and now the tribe that we will just begin studying, the Quechua tribe of South America, or Ecuador. And then, by the way, the Quechua are scattered throughout South America, not just Ecuador. There are a lot of Peruvian Quechua as well. And if any of you see the movie Dora the Explorer, the live action movie, she is a Peruvian Quechua, and she will speak in Quechua in the movie. So you might want to check that out if you're interested in all things tribal, as I am. So anyway, what brings tribes together? What are the commonalities that link these disparate tribes on at least 3 continents? And by the way, we have plans to study tribes in other countries. We'd love to go and study the Maori in New Zealand and some of the Asian tribes. And I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing that these commonalities will run through the tribes that we haven't studied yet. And that is, a strong sense of culture. I think that's probably the most important thing, the most basic thing, and it seems like a small thing, but it's actually a very big element. This sense of culture drives everything. It drives all tribal life, and it really drives their basic notions of justice. So I think the official title of this presentation was Tribal Notions of Justice. Understanding the culture of these tribes, whatever that may be, and every tribe's got its own culture, but they have a culture, and that's the important part. So they look at justice differently, they look at rehabilitation differently, their goals are different. The things the ways that they go about achieving their goals are different. The histories are different. So understanding the culture is crucially important. One of the things that we encountered when we got to Nevada was very much a sense of otherness. So and I think we're going to get to this. I think I'll get to this slide in a moment. But one of the tribes that we worked with had an all Indian tribal council, and of course all of the tribal members were Indian, but the justice system, the judge, the prosecutor, the clerk, and the chief of police were all white. And there were white people that grew up in Nevada, and they had been there for a long time. They all knew each other. They went to school together, but there was a sense of otherness. The Indian tribal members felt that the white people didn't quite understand their culture. And when we went to talk to the white people, we learned very quickly that the Indians were absolutely correct, that they did not understand their culture. And this is really, really important, right? So why do you even go to court, right? When you think about justice and you ask yourself, why are you even seeking? What do you mean by justice? So if I were to ask a person in Manhattan, what would you, and I'm talking about New York City, not the Manhattan tribe, but in New York City, what would you do if somebody stole your purse? What would you want to have happen? They would probably say, well, first they'd say, I want my purse back. I want my stuff back. And then they say, I want that guy to go to jail. He's a bad guy. He stole my stuff. I want that guy to go to jail. He'd be that guy, and they'd want him to go to jail. If you go to a tribe and you ask a member of a tribe, what would you want? What would happen if somebody stole your things? If a fellow tribal member stole your things, they would say, I want my things back. And then they would say something like, we want to fix whatever is wrong with this guy so he can come back to our tribe and be a contributing member of our tribe, because that's what we value, right? We value the tribe as a tribe. We value it as an entity that's greater than the individuals. And when one person breaks away from the mores of the tribe and does something to hurt another member of the tribe, we don't want to put him in prison. What good does that do for anyone? We want to fix him or her and bring them back so that they can contribute to the tribe. So that's really different. Those are really different ways of looking at justice and looking at the outcomes, and you have to understand that. So the culture is crucial. Um, Complex, simultaneous legal systems. The way that it is now in the world today, you've got these complex, simultaneous legal systems. Now, in Tanzania, you had tribal law, you had what they called customary law. So each tribe had its own legal system, its own custom. You had religious law, Sharia. So about a third of Tanzania is Muslim. And the island of Zanzibar, which is part of Tanzania, is 99.9% Muslim. So there's a strong Muslim strain in Tanzania. And they have their own religious legal system. So the people in Tanzania who are Muslim also have this Sharia system. And then you've got the formal legal system. You've got the Western style legal system, the courts. Same thing in American Indian tribes. You've got the tribal courts, and then you've got the Western courts. You've got this dual jurisdiction going on. And it's complicated, right? So in Tanzania, for example, you can choose which legal system you're going to use to do certain things. So one of the funny stories I heard was, a husband and wife, and I can go, this happens, a man and woman go to get married, and they are asked, well, under which system are you going to get married? And the man will say Sharia, and the woman will say formal, because, Sharia law favors men in marriage, but, formal law favors women. So then they have to go out and work it out and come back and decide which system they'll be married under. And then whichever system they choose to be married under, that's what will then govern their marriage. Should they ever become divorced, they'll divorce according to the system, whatever system they use to get married. And so this is complicated, and for anybody to navigate, for a lawyer, for a highly educated, legal professional to navigate, let alone someone with no legal representation at all. So and this is not unusual. I don't know yet in depth what we'll find in Ecuador with the Quechua, but I do know that they've got simultaneous legal systems there as well. So you've got these complex simultaneous legal systems. You've got people in these tribes who have a strong connection to the land and to their communities. So land is different for someone living in a tribe in Tanzania or somebody living on a reservation in the United States. Not only is it different because they're living closer to the land, but because the land has special meaning. It's sacred. It's the home of their elders, their ancestors. It's where their dead are buried. It's got a different, again, you live in New York City, you live in Washington, D.C., you buy a house, you sell a house, you move to another place, you go to this neighborhood. It means nothing other than the fact that you like the views here, or you like the access to the public, you like the public schools there, but you don't have 1,000-year-old histories on this land or generations-old histories on this land. So land is different to people in tribes. And then you've got this long history. You've got generations and generations. And, unfortunately, in the United States, the history with the land is much shorter than it should be, because American Indians were moved and they were broken up. But throughout, but still in some places in the United States, but certainly throughout Africa and South America, the people that are inhabiting this land, these tribes, have been together for at least, for generations, hundreds, if not thousands of years. And that has an impact on, again, how they're going to view the legal system, how they're going to use it, what it means to them. So if our great grandfathers were neighbors and friends, and then you and I have a problem, we have a beef, I'm going to approach it differently than, again, if you and I have been living on this land for 500 years, and you build a shed, and the shed peeks over onto my land a little bit, I'm going to approach that differently than if I'm living in Washington, D.C., in DuPont Circle, and my neighbor builds a little shed in the backyard and goes on my land, right? It's different. Not only is my feeling toward the land different, I might say to this guy, look, give me a couple of bucks, you can have the 20 feet that you took. Or, not only is our feeling about the land different, but this guy that lives next door to me in Washington, D.C., again, means nothing to me. I mean, I'm going to be nice to him. He's a fellow human being. He's a neighbor. He's a friend. But we don't have a 500-year history, right? So first of all, when you've got a long history with a people, you have to treat them with more respect and consideration because they are you, right? Your history is one. But also, you know that you're going to be living here, ideally, for hundreds more generations. You can't just you can't just take your neighbor to court and sue him and get a settlement and go on your merry way. You've got to live with this guy for more generations. So you treat your neighbors differently. Your approach to the legal system is different. So, for example, when we designed the legal system in Tanzania, when we designed the paralegal program in Tanzania, the way that we designed it was we brought in several working paralegals and we asked them, what do you do all day? What skills do you use? What things do you need to know? And we built the program around that, like what is really happening out there in the villages, in the clinics. And the one thing that we learned, so the paralegal program that we ended up designing in Tanzania is very, very different from the paralegal program that I run here in DC. So here I teach securities law and government contracting. Well, we don't teach that in Tanzania. In Tanzania, we teach mediation and arbitration and negotiation because those are the key skills for paralegals to have in Tanzania, right? So the idea that it's less adversarial and more mediation, I don't know what the word is, but mediation, arbitration, it's more of negotiating and working things out than adversarial, I win, you lose kind of a legal system. So this drives tribal justice. Now, a little bit about Tanzania, which is one of the most gorgeous places on earth. That's Kilimanjaro in the background. It really looks like that. If you've never been to Africa, go. If you've never been to Tanzania, go. It's gorgeous. But enough about that. It's a land of, the last time I checked, 55.57 million people, 58 lawyers. That means one lawyer for every 10,000 people, 3 legal systems, and every person there, or most people there, speak at least 3 languages. So most people speak their tribal language. All people speak their tribal language, although some of the young people now are starting to lose those tribal languages, and that's always sad. But almost everybody speaks their tribal language. In Tanzania, they speak Kiswahili, which is a kind of Swahili, and they speak English. So from 3rd grade up, school is taught in English, although there is a movement in Tanzania now to go back to teaching the upper level schools in Kiswahili. But as of now, they're still in English. So anybody with a 3rd grade education or higher speaks English. Everybody speaks Kiswahili, and all of the old people and most of the young people speak their tribal language. So, and again, we've got those 3 legal systems, which just makes for a very, very complicated legal situation, and it makes it very easy for somebody with any amount of knowledge or any connections to cow and bully and take advantage of somebody without. And most of the people in Tanzania don't have legal connections or sophisticated educations. Tanzania is about the size of Texas, which Texas ranks 23rd in the U.S. for lawyers per capita, and has 87,000 lawyers, just by way of comparison. 3 U.S. states with populations equivalent to Tanzania have 174,000 lawyers among them. So if you put together, and I just looked through the states and came up with a number that was closest to Tanzania's population. So if you put Texas, Florida, and Nebraska together, they've got 174,000 lawyers as opposed to Tanzania's 5,000. So it just gives you some understanding of the scope of lack of access to justice. So what they do, the way that they set up their legal system, or the way that the paralegal model works in Tanzania is this, and this is an actual legal clinic that I worked in. You see the logo on the front of the building that says Legal and Human Rights Office. So in Dar es Salaam, there is an organization, a non-governmental organization called the Legal and Human Rights Center. The founding director of that Legal and Human Rights Center is Helen Kijo Basimba, who is the woman that I met in Washington, D.C. way back in 2005 when she was here as a guest of Condoleezza Rice. Condoleezza Rice was the Secretary of State. She held an annual event. She initiated it, and it's still going on. It's called International Women of Courage, where she would bring women, courageous women from around the world to the United States to be honored and also to share with each other, to meet each other and to share their work and what they were doing. So Helen was one of those people. We met, and we ended up working together. So the Legal and Human Rights Center supports all of these little paralegal clinics all throughout the nation of Tanzania. So in this vast, nation the size of Texas, you've got these regions, right, and villages, and in most of these regions and villages, you'll have a little paralegal clinic like the one that you see here. The one that this one, and you see the word Sharia, that's law, and I don't know what everything else means. I did it one time, but I can't remember. But you see the word on the far right, Serengeti. So this was actually inside or just on the outer rim of the Serengeti, which you've seen, if you've ever seen it, if you saw Lion King, that was drawn in the Serengeti. So that's what it looks like. But anyway, this is the paralegal clinic. As you can see, it's a very small, humble building. There is no glass in the windows. There's no electric light inside. There's no heat or water. There's no plumbing, and you can see it's not even on a road. It's on a road, but not a paved road. It's on a dirt road. You see the bicycle parked out front. The paralegal who works there rides up on her bicycle, and then that's it. This is what the clinic looks like. If you go inside, there's some tables and chairs. There's some literature, and this is staffed by a person who lives in the village. So the paralegal in this clinic, or paralegals, there will be one or two. No, there'll be a couple, depending on how many you can get and how big it is, whatever. You'll have maybe a couple of paralegals, but they are villagers. They're local people. They're people who live in the town and who are smart and wise and respected, and they're people who love and care about their community enough to want to help. They don't get paid, or if they get paid, it's very, very little, nothing. They get supported, right? So the Legal and Human Rights Center sends them literature, and what they'll do, and they'll send them supplies, desks, laptops, if they can get them, if there's electricity in the place where the clinic happens to be. So they're in and of the community. They care about the community, and they're doing this because that's who they are. They do great work. They negotiate, they arbitrate, they mediate. They have enough legal knowledge to bring some weight to their negotiations and their arbitrations. So if two people are having a legal disagreement about a piece of land, the paralegal will know enough about land and property law to be able to say, well, Mary, you're really not, you're in the wrong here because the law would say that, Susan gets this land, whatever. So they might bring some legal knowledge to their communications, but they're not doing legal work. They're not going to court. They're not filing paperwork. Now, there are lawyers that come from the Legal and Human Rights Center, and they actually will ride circuits. So they'll go from clinic to clinic to clinic, from town to town to town, and support the paralegals there. Now, the paralegals in these clinics are traveling once a year or once every couple of years to Dar es Salaam or Arusha or Bagamoyo to take these formal paralegal education programs, which, by the way, the program that we designed in Bagamoyo is now in use throughout the entire nation of Tanzania. So they'll go in for this formal training and bring that back with them to the clinic. This is what it looks like. So you're sitting at a table, you got a couple of people, you've got the parties, they got their kids with them, you've got a paralegal with a pencil and paper taking notes. You don't have laptops, you don't have these big sophisticated courtrooms. You just have a couple of people sitting around a table telling their story and working things out. This is actually a photograph of a village that we visited while we held a community meeting. So the nation of Tanzania rewrote its constitution. They redrafted their constitution, and we went out to the villages to educate the people about what their Constitution currently said and how it was going to change, and to get their feedback on what they felt about the Constitution, what should be in the new Constitution. But again, I included this picture just to show how, you go and you meet. There's a town square. You sit on the grass. People ride their bikes up, and you have these community meetings, and this is how the people meet. So very informal, but very important. So in Nevada, we worked with the Las Vegas Paiute, the Moapa Paiute, the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, and the Walker River Band of Paiutes. The picture that you see behind you on the slide it's petroglyphs, right? When they write on rock. These are petroglyphs in a park, what's now a park called Valley of Fire in Nevada, right where the Moapa Paiute are. It's a very, very beautiful park, and you can just walk right up and look at these petroglyphs. They're very beautiful, and they're ancient, and you can see, the bighorn sheep over in the corner and some of the other people and the symbols. Going out there is a very powerful experience, and it really drives home that idea of these people. So the Moapa Paiute, having been on this land for hundreds, if not thousands of years, them having carved their stories right into the rock. They are literally in and of the earth. And I was there with my partner, Elizabeth Rule, who is Chickasaw, member of the Chickasaw Nation. And when we went out there, we talked about how if you had a young man or woman who was a member of the tribe, who was misbehaving, who was becoming delinquent, I would bring them out to that rock, and I would show them that rock, and I would say, this is your history, and you are in and of this earth. You've got to maintain, your people's dignity. So it was a very powerful feeling. Anyway, so those are the tribes that we studied. So there are 3 million Nevadans, 31,000 Native Americans in Nevada. So 31,000 of those 3 million people are Nevadans. There are 7,520 lawyers overall in Nevada. It's a vastly underserved state. That's 25 lawyers per 10,000. So there's still 25 times more lawyers than they have in Tanzania. 6, number of lawyers who serve Native Americans in Nevada. Native American individuals. So not the tribes, the big rich tribes with their casinos and their marijuana dispensaries and their rest stops. They have plenty of lawyers. There's lawyers falling all over themselves to work with the tribes, as corporations, essentially, as nations. But lawyers who understand American Indian issues, who understand the law, who understand the people and their personal, their individual problems. 6 that I could find. There may be more, but I looked pretty hard and I came up with 6. Excuse me. This is an actual picture of the actual desktop of the court clerk at the Moapa in Moapa. She's got this sign taped to her desk that says, "Please understand that the court clerk cannot and will not give legal advice." The people who go into the court go in unrepresented. They are so desperate. They're so they're so don't know what's going on. They're so concerned that they ask anybody for advice. They're in there asking the court clerk for advice, and she's telling them, "I can't give you advice," and they're asking anyway. And it gets so, they're so insistent that she has to tape up a sign that says, "I'm not going to give you legal advice." It seems to me like there might be a better way of approaching this problem rather than taping up signs saying, "No, I'm not going to help you," and that might be to, get some help. They have tribal advocates in these American Indian tribes, and but as I'm going to talk about in a moment, they're not quite as effective as they can be. Now, this is a man. This is the prosecutor, and I can't remember his name. I should have it written down, but I don't. Hozuki, I think his name is Hozuki. And he is the prosecutor at the Reno Sparks Indian Tribal Court. This guy, we ended up spending a couple of days with him. We observed the court, and we ended up talking to him and sort of shadowing him around. is one of the most wonderful people you've ever met. And as the prosecutor, he would end up advising and assisting the defendants in the court. So he would, go in and say, "Are you sure you want to plead guilty right now? Maybe, and he wouldn't actually, he's not their lawyer, so he couldn't represent them. But, a person might walk in and say, "Well, I just want to plead guilty." And he'd say, "Well, I'm not going to take your plea right now. Why don't you go home and you talk to somebody and then you come back and then we'll see if we can take your plea." But, so he's a good person. But, again, these people should not be at the mercy of the prosecutor happening to be a nice guy. What if he weren't, right? But we learned a lot from him, and one of the things that we learned in observing these courts was that they do have tribal advocates, and they, under tribal law, these non-lawyer advocates are allowed to give legal advice and assist these and represent people in court, represent defendants and litigants in court. However, they're unregulated. The tribal advocates are unregulated, and so there are some great tribal advocates, but there are some bad ones also. So you end up with some tribal advocates who end up doing more harm than good because, as I just said, people like this good prosecutor, and there are good judges, and there are good police officers who will go into the courts and will do what they can in an informal way to assist unrepresented litigants or defendants. But if they go in with a tribal advocate, then they're not unrepresented, and these people that normally would reach out and help don't help, right? Because they've got, and so many times a poor tribal advocate ends up doing more harm than good. So it is an issue, and it's one of the things that we are working on with the tribes is to try to find a way to regulate the tribal advocates. This is the Reno-Sparks Indian Colony Tribal Court. It's in it's a modular mobile building. It's not the big formal courtroom that you see in most major cities, but again, there were good people working there, so good things got done. This is the Moapa Paiute Indian, the tribal building. I don't know what you would call it. It's their tribal center. It's where the chief, it's where the tribal chairman lives, or where his office is. It's where the tribal council meets. It's the courtroom is right next door. The courthouse is right next door. This is a different courthouse, not the one you just saw. But this is just a picture of the sort of the community center for the Moapa Paiute. This is the justice system. So these are the people. This is and these were the people that I told you earlier in the beginning. I said, oops, sorry. Over here, the people, the American Indians, the Paiute, the Moapa Paiute, the tribal council that works in this building are all Indians. And they were the ones where we went in and we spoke to them who said, they just don't understand us. They're good people. They have their hearts are in the right place, but they just don't get it. And then you look at this woman, the man, this Martino is the chief of police, white guy. This woman in the middle with the jeans on is the judge, white woman. The woman on the far right with the blonde hair is the clerk of courts, a white woman. Oh, and she's the clerk, and she's also the social services, like the chief social worker. The only Native American is the woman in the middle with the long brown hair, and she's not even a Paiute. She's an Alaska Native who just relocated to Nevada. So I mean, at least she understands tribes, but she's not of that tribe. So this is the justice system, and the sense of otherness is very real. And it's the perceptions that each side doesn't understand the other is true. We sat down with this group and interviewed them for several hours, and I'm looking back on my notes. I don't think I reproduced it, but looking back on my notes and I was typing as they were talking. I was just typing nonstop, and I wasn't even looking down. I was typing. And I went back and reread my notes, and right in the middle of the page at one point I wrote to myself, I'm tired of listening to this, because I heard they weren't being mean and evil, but they kept saying those people, they do this, they do that, they do this, they operate like this, and it was again that sense of otherness, and it was not being in and of the community, and it worked to the detriment of the people. I think that's my last slide. So that is that's the story. That's just the road. That's again the actual road driving into Moapa. So some pretty remote country out there. So in July we're going to Ecuador, as I said. We're going to study the Quechua Indians. We're going to ask these same questions: what kind of representation is there? What are the legal systems? What is your notion of justice, and how is it working? That's kind of, and this presentation has really been sort of just a state of the tribes in essence. It's just we've examined the justice system, we've examined access to justice, we've looked at tribal notions of justice. We see where it is now, and I hope that in a couple of months I'll be able to come back and present again and give you some more updates on where it's going. So at this point, I will stop talking, and I would love to take any questions that you have. Just go ahead and unmute yourself if you've got a question.
I have a quick question. With regards to Tanzania, you said that there were 3 systems in Tanzania. Is there one that's the most favored?
So that's a really good question, and the answer is no. Well, the answer is it depends on who you're asking. Women and children tend to be the least powerful people in the community, like the formal system, because the formal system gives them a level playing field. Men like the tribal system or the customary system because that favors men, and especially powerful men, connected men, right? They're going to favor the customary system. Muslim men like the religious system. Muslim women, not so much. So it depends on who you're asking, but there's no one dominant system yet.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else have any other questions? All right. Well, listen, it's been wonderful talking to you. I love this topic, and I'm grateful to you for giving me the opportunity to share this. Please join us again in August-ish, so that I can update you on what happens in Ecuador and add some more beautiful pictures to this presentation. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.